Excellent. Right, let's take that out of the way. Just a little bit of information here. I'm using a Bockingford £140 knot paper. So it's got a medium texture. I've noticed I've got all sorts of things. I carry lots of paper around with me when I'm out and about with the brush dippers. So there's all sorts of marks and things on here, but I kind of sometimes think that adds to the effect of the painting. Right, so I'm going to get going. What I'm going to do is I'm going to, like I say, just put my sky in first, but then I will need to give it a little blast with a hairdryer. So when I do that, just sing amongst yourselves. Right, I'm going to start off by using this brush. This is a 30mm flat brush. It's got quite a short bristle to it, and it's very, very soft. You can get these through the SAA, and when I send you the information on the recording, I can send you a link to where they are if anybody's interested in them. And I believe they're on offer at the minute. So I need to wet my page. The paper is quarter imperial, beg your pardon, quarter imperial. So I'd say that's what, roughly 30 by 40? Not quite, but roughly. Now I'm wetting it, and then I'm going to come back and wet it again. Because I'm working on a slope, all the water just runs straight down to the bottom and then back up to the top. So I've got a nice even layer of water. I can see I've missed a bit down there. Always worth taking a little side view just to see that you've got everywhere. So you can see here that you've got that sort of matte. Now I'm using a mixture of ultramarine and a brighter blue. Mine, it happens to be a turquoise, but it could be a phthalo, it could be a peacock blue that I've got. It just makes it that little tiny bit brighter. So let's just show you, I'm mixing this up here. So it's a little bit of my ultramarine and a little bit of my turquoise. Do you like my nice clean palette? It's always a favourite of mine to use a colour called Muck Off the Palette. So I leave the bits that are in the corners. For me, they're perfect. So I'm starting bringing this across. And instead of picking up paint now, I'm just dipping the corner of my brush into my water pot. I need a little more because I want this to fade right down. There we go, taking that back up to the top. So I've got that smooth transition of colour. And the ultramarine is what's giving me this sort of slight granulation. And the turquoise is adding a little bit to it. So I'm also going to start at the bottom and work up. But not all the way. I need to leave room for my reflection to come in through there. I've washed and dried my brush. So we've got this sort of nice, clean transition. So you can have a look at that transition there. Okay, so now I'm gonna draw the scene in. There's arguments about putting the sky in first and putting the sky in seconds. It really doesn't matter. I just quite like the fact that you can do the whole piece in one go this way. So I'm going to come in and I'm just going to start. I'm just trying to make sure I don't do this halfway. Just going to bring my line in. Now, there's a way of getting this line straight. When you're trying to do a straight line, you can hook your finger, you can see here, you can hook your finger around the edge of the picture to bring your straight line in. Or like here, I hooked my hand onto the base of my easel and just run my hand along, and that gave me the opportunity to get a relatively straight line going on there. So there's lots of different ways of trying to make sure straight line. Personally, I'm not so keen on a ruler, but there's nothing wrong with it. Some people use tape, put tape down to create a straight line. So let's bring in, there's a bit of stuff going on at the back here.
Sorry to interrupt you, Denise, but a couple of questions are on the chat, which is the paper stretched, and what paints do you use, please?
Okay, my paper is not stretched. I'm using an 140 £, and by the time I've put that down and just dried it, I tend to find 140 £, is sufficient for the amount of water I was using there. If you're using tons of water, then you might want to stretch it. But I tend to find the reverse is actually works quite well, is if you're using loads of water, don't stretch it at all and just wet it until it flattens back out again. But there's no right or wrong. You've got to do how it works for you. You've got to paint in a way that suits your style and your setup and how you like doing it, really. I'm quite an impatient painter. So I tend to find that something like stretching paper involves planning, and I'm not very good at that bit. So I will bring this to the camera in a second. I'm just drawing some of these buildings in. Now there's little places. You could also use masking for some of these little bits of light, but personally, again, I'm too impatient to wait for the masking fluid to dry. So I tend to just go round things. I've got all these trees going on here, which I will just put in a minute. I love the fact that you were just getting on here, we were just getting these little bits of light that were hitting the roofs. This is what really appealed to me about this particular view. Oh, and the paints, what paints do I use? My favorite paints are actually a paint called Shin Han, which you can get from Jackson's. I didn't really have any loyalty to any brands until I tried using the Shin Han, and I just like them. They just work for me. I like the transparency in them. I like the clarity of them, and they're not hugely expensive. Right, so we've got these buildings on the edge here. This one's quite a big one. Any other questions so far? Right, so this is what I'm doing with the buildings. Not a huge amount of detail, but it's enough for me to see where things are. I'm not going to draw in any of the trees behind it because I will just paint those in. I do think I should mark where this slope is. Hasn't it been a gorgeous day today? First one we've had, so I don't blame anybody who did go out into the garden. It's where I'll be in a couple of hours' time. I'm going to position where a couple of these boats are. Again, this is more about so I can not paint around things, you know, so I can know where things are going to be later on. We've got any sailors going on in the group? Must have some. Right. I put a pencil mark in there, which I need to get a rubber for in a minute. I just dogged my pencil on it. I'm not going to draw the whole of the mast in. I will do that a little bit. Now, this boat that I've got in the foreground in the photograph is kind of right on the edge. So I'd quite like to bring that in a little bit. So instead of having it here, I'm going to have it coming across here. Now, I shall be off in a couple of weeks' time I run a painting holiday in Menorca, and we'll be doing plenty of boats when I'm out there. This is all in shade there. Then here, I'm not going to draw all of the details in. I'm just going to put in the bits that tell me where everything is. Mark will come in later. All these other bits will come in later. So let me see if I can show you how much of that I've drawn in there. There's a couple of other bits here I just want to position, and then we will get back onto our painting. More jetty, another boat. Now, looking at my photograph, I think this boat was sunk, so we're just going to resurrect it. Yeah. So I think I've probably got enough drawing in there to carry on. Okay, so I'm going to go here. This is the number has rubbed off because I've used it so much. That's what size this is, but I would say that's probably about a number 4 that I've got there. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to start off with the colour I have, the sky. So I'm going to take this colour, touch more ultramarine, and I'm going to add a little bit of a rose. This is a permanent rose. That just warms it up ever slightly. So I'm going to take a little tiny bit of that. And what I did there was I washed my brush up, dried it, and I'm just picking up a very, very small amount of that colour. And this is going to be my very distant, oh, too strong. I'm just bringing that all the way along the back. This comes up to somewhere along here. And then I'm just going to lift out where that sail is. Then let me just bring that in to see. Now, I don't like when I first put that colour down and it was a bit strong. I'm just going to smudge it. That was a little bit strong there. So it's just a very, very pale layer, and we need to build these layers up. So the next layer is going to be the same colour, but just a bit more of it. And I might even add a tiny little bit. I'm just going to add a tiny little bit of a burnt sienna in there as well, making it a little bit stronger.
Sorry to interrupt. I missed, what color did you use initially for that one?
To start off with, I took the colour that I'd used for my sky and I added a little bit of rose to it. That was my background colour. And
Okay.
then this time I've added a little touch of ultramarine into that. So it's basically now ultramarine, rose and burnt umber. So a tiny little bit of the red brown. And that gives me, it comes out darker on the screen, but it gives me this very sort of, it's a warm grey is what I'm aiming for.
Thank you.
That's okay.
And can I ask one other question? I'm sorry.
No.
I know you are simplifying things, which is great, but when you look into a picture, how do you work it in your mind to simplify the steps rather than complicate? So what I'm trying to say is, how do you dissect the photo or the picture into a simplified way and you go for it?
Okay, well, if you have a look here, what I'm doing here is this very back layer here, and then my next slightly stronger color is this here. So I'm looking at this, instead of 10 trees or whatever it might be, I'm looking at this sort of one block of foliage.
Right. So basically what I was trying to, when I look into this picture, so basically you go for the sky, the
Yep.
water, you put a couple of shades, and then you go into the background and the
Yep.
midground and then the foreground. Is that right?
Absolutely. So kind of you need, the drawing for me is about positioning everything. So once I only need to do enough drawing so I know where everything needs to be.
Okay. Thank you.
So I don't need, it's like drawing these trees in at the behind here that I'm going to put in shortly. If I draw them each tree in, I'm going to have pencil lines into my very light areas, the areas where I'm not putting very much paint.
Right.
So I don't want those pencil lines there. So I know there's going to be trees back there. So these blocks aren't so bad, but up here, I know there's going to be trees that have got kind of broken edges to them. So if I draw that, then those broken edges, it's quite difficult to draw them soft enough.
Yes.
Yeah, and so when it comes to the buildings, I'll explain kind of my thought processes
Sure.
on that as we go through. Is that okay?
Yes, that's brilliant. Thank you.
Yeah. Coming in behind here, I've got some bigger blocks of trees, and you can see I'm almost sort of dabbing with the brush. I'm just kind of popping it down. I want this to come across to about here. So I've kind of half put the trees in, and then I'm just taking some water and pulling that down. That allows me to put another layer on top. So if I want to put other things in front of that, then they'll show up. So that comes across to about there. Then I'm just breaking these edges up slightly. I'll bring this in to show you what I mean. So if you have a look, they're not a solid line at the top. I don't know if you can see that. We can get there if that's focus. So it's kind of a broken edge to give me the tops of that foliage. And one other thing you have to do is, I have to kind of wait for that bit to dry before I put the next bit on. So I'm going to be sort of jumping backwards and forwards along this this boundary, just letting things dry back a little bit. Now I have got what looks to me like a bank that's got a bit more colour that comes in the front coming across here. So again, I'm back to my ultramarine and a bit more of my burnt umber. This for me is a really good combination colour because you can make it as distant or as nearby as you want to. So I'm going to add a bit more brown to it this time. I'm just going to bring it forward. So I'm coming back across here. Just very gentle stroking of the brush. I'm avoiding that mast there. And then this comes in behind here a little bit. On this particular layer, there are some things along the top of this bank. So again, with this same colour, it's all kind of silhouetted in the light that we've got here. There's not really much information. It's all just silhouettes. There's a few shrubs. There's also a few things, I'm not really sure what they are. And there's another bit of shrubbery behind here. Okay, and behind this building, there is also a very soft tree. So I'm going to put that in. So it's got to be stronger than what's there, but not as strong as these ones that are going to come at the front. So. Can you see that? If I bring that a little bit closer, is that better? I'm just dabbing a little bit with the brush. So nothing on the chat. Okay, when it comes to doing things like the building here, this building has got light hitting the front of it and then it's shaded on the side. So we can build that up in layers. But that light at the front isn't pure white, but actually what I've got here is this very pale area from putting that sky in. So I'm just going to leave it as that and put in the side. And again, I'm going to use the same shadow colors I've been using, but this one is going to have more of the ultramarine into it. A little bit at the front there. That comes along from about there. And this front has got some windows in it, because why wouldn't you with that view? So again, same mix, my ultramarine and my burnt umber, but a bit more of the burnt umber. There's not going to be many colours in this whole painting, to be fair. It is quite monochrome, isn't it? So this roof, we've got a side on it here. Again, it's just a little darker. And there's a bit of a flat roof bit with more windows. Let's just bring that in for you to see. Just building those layers in there. And actually, I think this is quite a calming painting because it's just all very gentle. It's not all mad and frantic. Some of the paintings that I do are quite frantic. This is not. So let's see if we can put this couple of windows in the side now. And those are just like little dots on the side. Okay, so I need to the thing I need to try and do next is next to the building here, which I believe is part of the sailing club, there is a jetty and a slipway. So need to try and work on that. A little bit fiddly. But we'll start with side there. And it's about trying to leave as much of that background colour as you can and not going over too much of it. Somebody has got some beautiful birds singing in the background that I can hear. And then we've got the balustrades coming down on both sides. And I don't really want to paint the slats themselves. I'd rather leave that clear and have that light just on there, Bill. Again, if I just bring that in for you to see. I'll paint the water in a little bit. I'm just going to leave that for now. And the thing with boats and jetties is there's always something going on. There's always little bits of something, but you don't always know what it is. And I quite like just putting little, like here, just little dots and marks. It's just something's busy, but you don't really know exactly what it is. Other bits going on back there. So again, it's just making it look busy. You were asking me about, you know, how I choose. And when I'm looking at something like this, there's lots of little bits and pieces. So it's just a case of saying, okay, well, choose your big shapes and then put a few marks in, and then the rest of it you can just ignore. Couple of little tricks. Like I say, you need to have a look and see what things are important. So you're kind of having a look at the image and going, well, that's important. These little roofs are important, but the detail in front of it is almost indistinct. So that's not important. The other thing you can do, have you ever done the squinty thing?
Yeah, every now and then.
Yeah. So if you almost close your eyes and look at your picture, most of the detail will be lost. But what you end up left with is the things that matter that you need to include. So if you do the squinty thing, that will help you get rid of the information that's not urgent. Okay, now I'm coming up to these buildings here and I want to put some more trees in behind. I was just waiting for that bit behind there to dry. So I'm now going to come in and put these trees in behind here. So I'm going to mark where my roof is so that I don't go over that. And then I'm going to do a little bit of dry brushing. I'll explain that in a second. And then I shall put a few trunks in amongst this. All of the paper, I'm sure most of you have done it, but all of the paper has a surface, so it has a texture to it. So you've got three sorts. You've got rough, which has a lot of surface, knot, which this one is, which has got a little bit of a surface, and hot pressed, which is quite smooth. So when you dry brush, what you're trying to do is actually just paint the top of the bumps of the paper. So instead of painting with the tip of the brush, what I'm going to try and do is paint with the side of the brush. So instead of having my brush up like this, I've got my brush almost laid down. And I'm just very lightly touching the top of that bump on that paper. And that gives me this just very delicate light mark. I'm going to add a little more of that umber to what I'm doing, just making it a little stronger. And what I'm also doing is I'm starting from the outer edge and just brushing into the center. There is no right or wrong. This is just my personal way of working with this. So I've got that building there. And those two there. So again, because I want that light on the roof to show up, I'm going to put more colour in just behind them. And then again, I'm just going to put in some of those trunks. Less is more with this often. Let's bring that down. Again, I want to leave the front of the building light. What's nice for me about doing this particular picture on Zoom is because it is quite small and delicate. It's quite difficult to see from the back of a room. So this does allow me to do a demo of something like this. Very monochrome. All right, so we've got that. There's another jetty coming down here, and all you can see of it is just the tiniest slither of light. You've just got this tiniest bit where I haven't painted anything, and that gives you another little slope down into the river. This is the estuary at Woodbridge, as I said. So kind of almost when the tide goes right out, you've just got mud flats here, so it's quite interesting. See where I'd put things. I've gone over one there. So lots of little bits of building coming along. I'm going to come back in with a bit more dark in a minute. I just want to crack on with these, and we've got some taller trees to have another layer of trees in front of this in a moment. There seems to be some steps coming down there. And there also seems to be a crane going on in there somewhere, which I'm quite keen to include. So again, a few little marks have created all sorts of stuff going on. More trees behind this building. And you can see I'm using stronger paint here again. It's just building up. Now, this building doesn't have quite so much light on the front of it, but I'm going to keep it light-ish. So I'm almost going to go back to my background intensity of colour. So all I'm doing is just using water and just taking a little bit of muck off the side there. I've cleaned my brush out and just pull that up onto the roof. But the side is much darker, as with the other buildings. Again, I've just left a couple of little flecks of white. I have a name for those when you kind of just leave little gaps in your painting. And I call them windows of gloriousness because I just think they're fabulous. It makes it painterly instead of coloured in, if that makes sense. I've got some bigger trees in the corner here, so I'm going to do the same process, but it's just a strong colour. Going over some of those other bits. This comes up from back there. So that's how much I've put into the tops. And then I'm just going to use the point of the brush just to give me a little bit of trunkage. I'll bring that up to the screen in just a moment. These ones don't have very much tops on them at all. I'm trying to remember when the photograph was taken, and I remember it was bitterly cold when we were there on this particular day. We were sitting here painting. So I've got a feeling it was March or something like that. But it is a great place to paint if you ever get the opportunity. Bit of smudging. And then we have those trees in behind there. There's lots more things down here that we can just make busy. And also during the break, I can try and evict several wasps that have decided to invade my studio. I can hear them just buzzing around my head. So a lot of this is more just making things busy. I'm looking to see what shapes I can see rather than trying to work out what they are. What can I actually see? And where can I see light and dark? Another bit of dock, whatever you want to call it, coming off. There's all sorts of things going on in there that I can't work out from this reference. And that's the advantage, which I think, you know, you're all doing exactly right in your going out painting, is you can actually walk over there and have a look if you're not sure, or move your position so you can see something better. I think there's lots of little boats in there. So I've just done some horizontal marks for the boats and then a whole load of vertical marks for masts on the boats. Got a little bit more to do on those buildings as well. So let me just carry on with making this busyness. There are some marks coming down. This one in particular, I can again see the windows and things on there. So I'm just gonna, it's literally just a touch. Little touch in there, and let's have some dark ones down the side. So that building now has a bit of life to it. And I quite liked that crane, so I think I'm going to put that in. Wish me luck. Again, it all just adds another dimension of what's going on. Now, for me, it's in amongst all these trees, but I'm going to move it up a little bit just so it's a little more visible. So at the top of my crane. And hopefully you can see the top of that little crane there. So I'm going to start adding, I'm going to start working on the water. So I'm going to start off by putting some of the boats in. You're not going to be surprised with the colours that I'm going to use. So it's all pretty much all part of these blues again. So it's ultramarine and the burnt umber. I have said I'm going to introduce another colour to Mark in a minute, which I will. I might even introduce two more, Mark. So here I had my sail. So I'm just going to put the boat at the base of the sail. Mark that in. This is like a transparent sail. And this has got like these cross markers in it. Now, if you wanted to at this point, you could put something, just bring that in there. You could put a sail that's got a bright colour or something on it, but I just don't think that would work within the way this reference shows itself to me. It was just one of those, it was quite early in the morning and there just wasn't a massive amount of light. So I'm going to put the boats and the buoys in. Now, do I do that before? No, I'm going to do some of the water first. Okay, so I'm going to introduce this to you. This is an SAA watercolour and it's their SAA Silver. And it's just adds a tiny, tiny little bit of sparkle. So I'm going to put that into the water. I hope you'll be able to see it, and I'll tilt the picture so that you can hopefully see it. But if I just put some of this in here, it kind of doesn't really look like very much. It's just grey. Again, like we did with the trees, I'm going to do a little bit of dry brushing. So I'm coming in. I'm just doing a little bit of dry brushing across. Now, my light has got to kind of come in down the middle here. So I'm going to come in from the sides. This is going to be in layers of colour, a bit like the trees were. Just the lightest touch. Now I'll have to let that dry and then try and show you the sparkle. With my boats, anything that's going to be darker than my water, I can go over. Like the mast here, I'll still be able to see it through. But if you don't have silver, you could still do this with a very light grey, first of all, and then we can add the blues into it.
You drying your brush a bit as you pick the paint up?
Every time I wet my brush, it goes on here, and that's my way of controlling how much water I have. Okay. So yeah, it's kind of coming onto the cloth all the time. There'll be a lot more colour coming through here in a little bit. So this is just starting to build.
Denise Leslie has asked, do you use a small brush even for a large expanse of water, please?
I often use this brush because it gives me a nice flat surface, and I might use that in a minute. It's not that small a brush when you look at it when I'm painting on the side of it. A mixture, it just depends on how I'm feeling on the day, really. But yes, you can use, if you want to do something like this where I want this to be quite delicate, then I would still use a small brush, yes.
Thank you.
Now, I really want to be able to show you this sparkle, but I'm not sure it's going to show on the screen. I'll have to try and make sure I get at least a photograph of it. So having got a bit of the silver, I'm now going to mix, and this is quite interesting to see. When you mix the silver, it kind of just fades your colour down a little bit. So this is the silver mixed with the ultramarine. Again, just dabbing my brush, starting to bring that across as well. Some places I want it to cover more solidly, and then there's places I want it to be more sort of this dry brush effect. We've got to do some sideways scribbling in a bit as well. The other thing I tend to find I don't do is I never mix up very much of any one colour. And for me, I know what colours I've used to mix, so I can mix more and more of them. But if I do it in lots of little batches, each one is going to be slightly different. And then that's going to give me a bit more interest on the canvas, the slight changes in colour. It's not a wall that's a flat uniform colour. It's got quite a variety to it. But I do know artists that mix up, large batches of colour, and they use the same colour for the whole thing, and that's absolutely fine. There isn't a right or a wrong. This is just the way I do it. It's kind of a bit more solid towards the edge. Are we starting to get a bit of shimmer going on here? A little bit of ripplage. Is that a word? Right, let's come back in this side. And again, in the distance, my colour is much, much paler, more faded, more washed out, more of the silver, less of the blue. And then maybe not quite that suddenly. Let me just add a bit more colour into it as we come forward. Quick slurp tea.
Make a mistake with too much colour or something, do you find that relatively easy to correct?
Well, you can either just wash it out, so clean your brush out with water and just dilute what's on the paper before it dries, or just decide that it's a happy accident and you're going to live with it. It just depends on how you feel about it, I suppose. Now this boat is quite dark that I've got here, so I can get away with not worrying too much about its edges. But for example, up here, if I didn't want that transition to be quite so sudden, I've just cleaned my brush out.
Just, I do make a lot of mistakes, and I find it get very patchy, horrible bit where I've tried to correct it.
Then I would say, just say it was meant to be, and leave it alone and don't try and change it, unless it's obviously something that's, you know, really in the wrong place. But say that's sort of a hard line that I didn't intend to have, just go, yeah, it's fine.
That approach.
So having got a bit of the silver, I'm now going to mix, and this is quite interesting to see, when you mix the silver, it kind of just fades your colour down a little bit. So this is the silver mixed with the ultramarine. Again, just dabbing my brush, starting to bring that across as well. Some places I want it to cover more solidly, and then there's places I want it to be more sort of this dry brush effect. We've got to do some sideways scribbling in a bit as well. The other thing I tend to find I don't do is I never mix up very much of any one colour. And for me, I know what colours I've used to mix, so I can mix more and more of them. But if I do it in lots of little batches, each one is going to be slightly different. And then that's going to give me a bit more interest on the canvas, the slight changes in colour. It's not a wall that's a, you know, flat uniform colour. It's got quite a variety to it. But I do know artists that mix up, you know, large batches of colour and they use the same colour for the whole thing, and that's absolutely fine. There isn't a right or a wrong. This is just the way I do it. And it's kind of a bit more solid towards the edge. Are we starting to get a bit of shimmer going on here? A little bit of ripplage. Is that a word? Right, let's come back in this side. And again, in the distance, my colour is much, much paler, more faded, more washed out, more of the silver, less of the blue. And then maybe not quite that suddenly. Let me just add a bit more colour into it as we come forward. Quick slurp tea. With a boat, I'm just referring to the bottom hull of the boat, not the cabin or anything that's on top. But if
Right.
you draw in like an infinity symbol,
Okay.
so it's a bit like a figure 8 on its side,
Yeah.
then find a high point here. So we're going to make that a peak. So that's the top of the curve of the upward arch.
Yeah.
And bring the front down there. We bring the back down there. Join it up. We've got a boat.
Oh, wow. That's a
And that
lovely
will go
idea.
there. So you can then, you know, if you wanted to make it a little rowing boat, you can just put a few wooden slats on there. If it's got
Oh,
a structure, you know, if you've got things that come out of it, then you've got rowlocks and various different things.
it's a lovely way of remembering it, isn't it?
It's
It's
just
a
that
nice
little thing.
base.
The other way you can do it is you can actually do it as a figure 8, but very flattened out.
Yeah.
So you've got a flattened out figure 8. And again, in somewhere in here, you need to have your peak.
Right.
So that's the prow of the boat. Got the side of the boat there.
Oh, yeah.
Just join it up at the back, and that would be, if this is a rowboat, for example, that would be the seat going across the middle and your bits going
Oh,
around.
it's really helpful. Yeah. What a clever idea. Yeah. Super, isn't it?
I've got a front. We know the shadow is to the right way this is going. So we've got that. There's a little bit of stuff going on. Let's have a few things on our boat. Now, when it comes to putting masts in the boat, if you're confident, you can just paint them in. But if you're not confident, put them in pencil. And particularly for distant boats, that's fine. You don't need it any stronger than that. So if I just show you what I mean, I will paint this in afterwards. But if you aren't sure, just draw it in. And then you can always rub it out and move it if you need to.
Right.
So if you want to, you could then paint over that. Got a few things going on here. So, yep, you're starting to get your little boats. Now at that distance, you wouldn't have a huge amount of reflection going on, but I'm just going to ground it a little bit. And let's do a couple of others. Hopefully that one's still a little bit wet, so I'm going to come over here for a minute. I'm not quite sure what this is, but I'm making this into a boat. That's the thing with reference photographs. Even though it's one I took myself, you can't always see all the details of what it is that you have in the picture. So you either just have to make something up based on your knowledge, or just fudge it. Yeah, this one's got a mast, so let's be brave and just put it in. And just gonna anchor the boat in a little bit. Let's come over here. And I'm going to pick up a little bit more of my turquoise in places here now. I should be putting some more of that into the water. But as well as my shadow colour, I'm going to have little extra bits coming in. Now, the closer they get, the more of a reflection you would see. Right. Let's be brave with our mast on this one. So that's our boat over there. Okay, I need to do the big brave one. So my blue and my brown, giving me my shadow colour. I can still just about see my drawing underneath here. All right, let's start off with the side. Now, I'm not a sailor, and I do know sailors do get quite upset when you don't paint the exact rigging or whatever, particularly if it's their boat. But I'm doing boat-ish. Slightly darker line along the top. And if you look closely, you'll see my painting isn't particularly, it's not exact, it's not straight. For this sort of painting, I think that's absolutely fine, but that's just my personal thoughts. Something in the middle there. Side going along. Little top. We can see inside, but I'm just going to try and leave a little bit of that light showing. I'm doing this all quite muted because I can come back in and make things stronger, but it's much harder to make things lighter. So a little bit that sticks out the front. Now, here, my mask comes up from there. Am I brave enough? Do you think I should be brave and just go for it? What do you reckon?
Yeah, go on.
Wish me luck, because this one comes up to about here. That was quite scary. Right, now I've got that, I can come back in, make it a little stronger. See, it's not exactly where it was in the original picture because I've moved my boat in a little bit, if you remember. And we've got this mast coming back out here. So again, I'm trying to work out what I can understand from this, but I'm not worried about the bits I can't understand. Now we've got the railings at the front here.
Push pit.
Is that what it's called?
Mm-hmm. No.
I was going to call it that Titanic
pull.
moment.
Yeah, pulpit is the other one.
Yes, I can see why. Again, I can just about make out sort of I presume it's a window in this side there. Now this one, I'm going to come back to my turquoise. Can't really see it in my reference, but I quite like the idea of this having a turquoise stripe along the side there. Now I need to make it slightly darker coming down at the base.
Denise, when I made some original notes of your colour,
Yeah.
I thought you said burnt sienna, but I noticed just a little while ago you said burnt umber.
I think I've actually got burnt umber, so I apologise if I said burnt sienna.
No,
But you could use either. If you were using burnt sienna, you just need a little bit more of the ultramarine in places.
Yeah, okay.
So now I'm taking my colour that I'm using on the side of the boat. Start giving me a little bit of reflection.
Does it worry you that the boat is sailing out of the picture and not into the picture?
Not at all. It's more in the picture than it was in my reference.
Well, that's true.
So what I'm doing here is just a bit of sideways scribbling. Now this one has, it's tied to, I presume there's an anchor there somewhere.
Mooring.
Yeah. Now we haven't done this one yet, have we? Now I'm gonna wait to do that because there's bits of it that's still wet and I'm gonna put my fist in it like I've just done. Again, coming through here. So I'll put that other bit of the rigging in. Now there's lots of fine lines. If I was going to put any of those fine lines in, all the bits that hold this together, I would just do it with pencil. Because I think doing it with a brush would be too strong. So if you can see that, you can see there's just like a hint of those lines, but they're very, very faint. If I painted those in, it would be almost impossible to get those to go in with paint without it looking too heavy.
Yep.
So that's my way of doing that. This one does need to go in. Excuse me, I'm just going to turn it around a second.
You want the bows bit.
Now that does, it should be a bit stronger, but again, in terms of the painting, I don't really want it any stronger than that. But I'll leave that and live with it and see how I feel. So I'm going to come back in with my ultramarine and my turquoise. So I'm bringing in this sort of mixed blue. And I'm going to start here. And again, I'm doing this scribbling sideways. This is to give me a bit more of that ripple. And I'm starting in the foreground because this is where you see it most. You don't really see it so much back here. So a mixture of my blues. Again, this is going to depend on you know, your reference and your image that you're painting, but this kind of almost sometimes they have, like here, you get these sort of almost ripples showing, and that's what I'm trying to convey. Now, I don't want to lose that light, so I'm just going to keep it very delicate across that pale section. And then bring it in a little more as we come back across. Going back to my brushes, I have only actually used 2 for the whole painting. And that for no other reason than if it does the job, I'll carry on using it. I'm just quite lazy, or I get quite excited and get carried away. So yeah, it's not that I dislike other brushes. It's just these are the ones I've picked up today. Okay. Mixing up a little more colour. I'm occasionally picking up a bit of the umber as well. If it gets in like there a little bit too thick, then I just use a damp brush and just pull it around. Getting a bit of shimmer. Again, I need to fade it back, so I'm going to add some of my silver into that, and that will just soften the colour of it as I come back here. So just bringing it in gently. I've dropped my turquoise. I'm still using the silver and the ultramarine. So I've dropped that brighter colour as I come back up the picture. And just come in a little bit closer. Give me an edge on these. Just holding the brush with my finger on the paper, just supporting it. I need to do the same this side a little bit. A bit stronger as I come forward, a bit more of that turquoise in this little bit here. Now, something I haven't put in yet is the reflection of the mast. There's a sort of one in the reference picture, but if I've got this sort of shadow reflection going on down here, I just want to have my mast. Well, it's got to be nice and wiggly. I don't think it needs to be more than there. Right, that's what we've ended up with as our reflection. And you can see all of this scribbling. You can add that in 2, 3, 4 layers. You can keep building that. But I do want to add a couple of other, either mooring buoys or something. I think it just, again, adds. And like I did before, I'm going to put those in, clean and dry my brush, and then just flatten their bottoms. There is a marker in the water here somewhere, so let's put it there where it's going to be visible. So again, it's a post with some kind of sign on the top of it. So we're going to have a reflection of that post. Love a reveal. I love a reveal anyway. There's a little trick to taking masking tape off that I don't know if...
Peel away from the picture.
Yeah, so instead of pulling like at 90 degrees, if you just fold it back, then it is far less likely to tear than if you just sort of rip it off. Having done many a demo where I didn't take my own advice. And also it's much easier if your paper is completely dry. So that's another. There we go.